Ruskin Bond from the Cradle of Nature. Let's read with me. Angry River. In the middle of the big river was a small island. The river swept round the island, sometimes clawing at its banks, but never going right over it. It was over 20 years since the river had flooded the island, and at that time no one had lived there. But for the last 10 years, a small mud walled hut with a sloping thatched roof had stood there. The hut had been built into a huge rock, so only three of the walls were mud, and the fourth was rock. Goats grazed on the short grass which grew on the island, and on the prickly leaves of thorn bushes. A few hens followed them about. There was a melon patch and a vegetable patch. In the middle of the island stood a peepal tree. It was the only tree there. Even during the great flood, when the island had been under water, the tree had stood firm. It was an old tree. Indians love peepal trees. A sacred tree, the peepal, the abode of spirits, good and bad. Don't yawn when you're sitting beneath the tree, grandmother used to warn Sita. And if you must yawn, always snap your fingers in front of your mouth. If you forget to do that, a spirit might jump down your throat. And then what will happen? Asked Sita. It will probably ruin your digestion, said grandfather, who wasn't much of a believer in spirits. The people had a beautiful leaf, and grandmother likened it to the body of the mighty god Krishna. Broad at the shoulders, then tapering down to a very slim waist. It was an old tree, and an old man sat beneath it. He was mending a fishing net. He had fished in the river for 10 years. He had taught his son to fish, but his son had gone to work in a factory in a city, nearly 100 miles away. He had no grandson, but he had a granddaughter, Sita, and she could do all the things a boy could do, and sometimes she could do them better. She had lost her mother when she was very small. Grandmother had taught her everything she knew. But neither of her grandparents could read or write, and as a result, Sita couldn't read or write either. There was a school in one of the villages across the river, but Sita had never seen it. There was too much to do on the island. While grandfather mended his net, Sita was inside the hut, pressing her grandmother's forehead, which was hot and with fever. Grandmother had been ill for 3 days and could not eat. She had been ill before, but she had never been so bad. When Sita noticed that grandmother had fallen asleep, she tiptoed out of the room on her bare feet and stood outside. The sky was dark with monsoon clouds, the monsoon rains had come early at the end of June. Now it was the middle of July, and already the river was swollen. Its rushing sound seemed nearer and more menacing than usual. Sita went to her grandfather and sat down beside him beneath the peepal tree. When you're hungry, tell me, she said, and I will make the bread. Is your grandmother asleep? She sleeps, but she will wake soon, for she has a deep pain. The old man stared out across the river at the dark green of the forest, at the grey sky, and said, Tomorrow, if she is not better, I will take her to the hospital at Shahganj. You may be on your own for a few days, but you have been on your own before. Sita nodded gravely. She had been alone before, even during the rainy season. Sita was not afraid of being alone, but she did not like the look of the river. That morning, when she had gone down to fetch water, she had noticed that the level had risen. Grandfather, if the river rises, what will I do? You will keep to the high ground, and if the water reaches to the high ground, then take the hens into the hut and stay there. And if the water comes into the hut, then climb into the peepal tree. It is a strong tree. It will not fall. And the water cannot rise higher than the tree. And the goat's grandfather, I will be taking them with me, Sita. I may have to sell them to pay for good food and medicines for your grandmother. As for the hens, if it becomes necessary, put them on the roof. But do not worry too much. And he patted Sita's head. The water will not rise as high. I will be back soon. And won't grandmother come back? Yes, of course, but they may keep her in the hospital for some time. Towards evening, it began to rain again, big pellets of rain scarring the surface of the river. But it was warm. It was warm rain, and Sita could move about in it. She was not afraid of getting wet. She rather liked it. In the previous month, when the first monsoon shower had arrived, washing the dusty leaves of the tree and bringing up the good smell of the earth, she had run about shouting for joy. She was used to it now, and indeed a little tired of the rain. But she did not mind getting wet. She walked about barefooted, bare-legged. She was very sure on her feet. Her toes had grown accustomed to gripping all kinds of rocks, slippery or sharp, and though thin. She was strong. She moved about in the pouring rain, chasing the hens into a shelter behind the hut. A harmless brown snake, flooded out of its hole, was moving across the open ground. Sita picked up a stick, scooped the snake up, and dropped it between a cluster of rocks. She had no quarrel with the snakes. They kept down the rats and the frogs. When Sita finally went indoors, she was hungry. She ate some dried peas and warmed up some goat's milk. Grandmother woke once and asked for water. When grandfather held the brass tumbler to her lips, it rained all night. The roof was leaking and a small puddle formed on the floor. They kept the kerosene lamp alight. They did not need the light, but it made them feel safer. The sound of the river had always been with them.